I've always been running from something. Not literally, at least not until Borneo, but running nonetheless. From expectations, from commitment, from the person I was afraid I might become if I stayed in one place too long. My name is Jamie Chen, 26 years old, half Chinese on my mother's side, though I never learned the language, something that became painfully obvious when I tried to communicate with locals in Malaysia. Before Borneo, I was just another directionless college graduate with a philosophy degree and mounting student debt, working as a barista while trying to figure out what to do with my life. The trip wasn't planned, it was an escape. My father had just been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and instead of staying to help my mother care for him, I emptied my savings account, deferred my loans, and bought a one-way ticket to Bangkok. I told myself it was something I needed to do to find myself before settling down to adult responsibilities. The truth was simpler and uglier. I was terrified of watching my brilliant, articulate father, a literature professor, slowly lose himself. So I ran. Thailand first, with its well-established backpacker roots, then Vietnam. Cambodia after that. By the time I reached Malaysia 4 months later, I'd crafted a personality for my fellow travelers. Jamie the Fearless, Jamie the Adventurous. I'd tell stories in hostels about close calls with corrupt police or border officials, mostly exaggerated, about mysterious jungle temples I'd discovered, mostly guided tours, about profound conversations with monks that changed my perspective. Mostly one-sided exchanges, where I nodded sagely at things I didn't understand. The facade was exhausting to maintain, especially because with each passing week, the standard backpacker circuit felt increasingly hollow. The same attractions, the same bars, the same conversations. Everyone seeking authenticity while following identical paths worn smooth by thousands before them. In Kuching, I met Sasha and Derek, a Canadian couple making their way through Southeast Asia on their gap year before medical school. They were the real deal, genuinely kind, curious about local cultures beyond Instagram opportunities, and surprisingly knowledgeable about the flora and fauna of the regions we visited. Sasha spoke 3 languages and was working on a 4th. Derek could identify dozens of bird species by their calls alone. They made my cultivated backpacker persona feel even more fraudulent. Yet they befriended me anyway. We bonded over humid evenings and cheap beer, comparing travel stories and future plans. Or rather, their future plans. They had them in abundance. When they asked about mine, I deflected with jokes about beach bungalows and finding rich spouses. They laughed, but I could see the gentle concern in their eyes. They recognized a drifter when they saw one. It was Derek who first mentioned the village. He'd heard about it from an Australian anthropologist they'd met in Penang, a remote settlement deep in the rainforest, where a small indigenous community maintained traditional ways of life, with minimal outside influence. Not completely untouched by the modern world, but far enough removed that visitors were rare. No guided tours, no gift shops, no performance of culture for tourists, Derek said, his eyes bright with excitement. Just real people living as they have for generations. It sounded exactly like the authentic experience I'd been pretending to seek. How do we even get there? I asked, already knowing I'd agree to whatever they proposed. My cultivated image wouldn't allow otherwise. We'd need a guide, Sasha said, someone who knows the area. 2 days later, we were sitting across from Kenji, a local guide in his early 50s with weather-beaten skin and quiet, watchful eyes. He'd been recommended by the owner of our hostel, who vouched for his knowledge of the deepest parts of the jungle. Unlike the enthusiastic tour guides who catered to tourists, Kenji was reserved, almost reluctant. 5 days to reach the village, he said after examining our proposed route. Difficult terrain, not for beginners. His eyes lingered on me, and I felt instantly exposed, as if he could see through my practice stories to the person underneath, someone who had never hiked more than a day in their life. Pride made me nod confidently. We're prepared. A slight frown crossed Kenji's face. Physical preparation is only part. he said cryptically. The jungle, it demands respect. He quoted a price that was reasonable given the length of the journey. We agreed to leave in 2 days after gathering necessary supplies. As he left, he handed each of us a small wooden carving of a bird. "Keep with you," he said, "for protection." I nearly rolled my eyes but caught myself. Part of the experience, I figured. Local superstition to enhance the adventure. The night before our departure, I called my mother for the first time in weeks. The connection was poor, her voice breaking up over the distance. "Dad had a good day," she said, forced cheerfulness straining her voice. "He remembered the neighbor's name and even played chess." I swallowed hard. "That's great." "When are you coming home, Jamie?" The question hung between us, carried on satellite signals across oceans. "Soon," I lied. "I just need a little more time." "We need you here," she said simply, without accusation. I changed the subject, telling her about the trek we were about to undertake. I described it as a short, guided tour, not a 5-day journey into remote jungle. No need to worry her. "Be careful," she said. "Your father keeps asking where you are. Yesterday he said he had a bad feeling. One of his premonitions." My father's premonitions had been a family joke throughout my childhood. His claimed ability to sense when something was wrong, especially with me. The time he'd insisted on picking me up from a sleepover at 2 a.m. because he felt I was in danger, only to discover my friend's older brother had brought home drunk friends who were getting aggressive. The morning he'd called my school to check on me after dreaming I was hurt. The same day I fell during gym class and broke my wrist. "Dad's confused about a lot of things right now," I reminded her gently. "I know, just be careful anyway, for my sake." After promising I would, I spent a restless night in the hostel, dreams filled with images of my father wandering lost through unfamiliar rooms, calling my name. Morning came with oppressive humidity and a sense of foreboding I couldn't shake. I blamed it on the phone call, on guilt. Sasha noticed my mood as we waited for Kenji. "Having second thoughts?" she asked kindly. "No shame in changing your mind." I forced a smile. "Not a chance. I was born for adventure." Another lie. I'd been afraid of the dark until I was 14, hated camping, preferred air conditioning to fresh air. But I'd invested too much in my false identity to back out now. Kenji arrived with a local teenager he introduced as his nephew Tam. The boy would accompany us for the first day's journey, then return to Kuching with our excess gear. He spoke little English, but smiled easily, his youthful energy a contrast to his uncle's solemn demeanor. As we shouldered our packs and began our trek, I found myself walking beside Kenji, while Sasha and Derek followed several paces behind, pointing out interesting plants to each other. "You worry," Kenji said after we'd been walking in silence for nearly an hour. I glanced at him, surprised. "I'm fine, excited actually." He shook his head slightly. "Not about the jungle, about something far away." I faltered, nearly tripping over a root. "My father is sick," I admitted, unsure why I was confiding in this stranger when I'd said so little to Sasha and Derek. Kenji nodded, as if this confirmed something. "The jungle knows these things. It hears our fears, our regrets." I smiled politely, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Is that part of the local religion?" "Not religion, experience." He pointed to a massive tree ahead of us, its trunk wider than a car. That tree was growing before any religion came to this land. It has seen more than all your holy books. I fell silent, unsure how to respond to his conviction. The weight of my pack was already making my shoulders ache, and we'd barely begun our journey. The thought of 5 days of this made me question my decision, but pride kept me moving forward. That night, making camp in a small clearing, I watched Kenji place small bundles of leaves at the perimeter of our site. When I asked what he was doing, he simply said, "Boundaries." To remind the jungle where we end and it begins. I caught Sasha and Derek exchanging glances, half amused, half intrigued. They were approaching Kenji's behaviors as cultural experiences to be respected. I was finding it increasingly difficult to hide my skepticism. After a simple meal of rice and dried fish, Tam entertained us with stories of jungle spirits, translated by his uncle. He spoke of the Orang Bunian, invisible people who lived parallel lives to humans, and of forest guardians who protected sacred places from intruders. His expressive face and dramatic gestures transcended the language barrier, and I found myself drawn into the tales despite my disbelief. As the fire died down and we prepared to sleep in our small tents, Kenji issued a warning. Stay close tonight. The jungle listens most carefully in darkness. Inside my tent, I wrote in the journal I'd been keeping sporadically throughout my travels. But instead of documenting the day's journey, I found myself writing a letter to my father. Words I should have said before leaving. Apologies for running away when he needed me. Promises to return soon. I fell asleep with the journal clutched to my chest, tears drying on my face. The morning brought no relief from the humidity. Tam departed for Kuching with our extra supplies after breakfast, leaving us alone with Kenji. The day's hike was more strenuous, the terrain increasingly challenging. By mid-afternoon, I was struggling to keep pace, too proud to ask for rest breaks but clearly falling behind. Sasha dropped back to walk with me, her concern evident. "We can go slower," she offered. "No rush." "I'm fine," I insisted, even as my breath came in ragged gasps. "Just getting my jungle legs." She smiled kindly. "You know, it's okay to not be okay sometimes." Something in her tone broke through my defenses. "I'm not sure I know how to be real anymore," I admitted. "With others or myself." "That's what travel is supposed to be for," she said. "Finding yourself, not losing yourself in who you think you should be." The truth of her words stung, but before I could respond, Kenji called for us to stop. He was standing motionless on the trail ahead, staring intently into the dense foliage to our right. "What is it?" Derek asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. Kenji didn't answer immediately. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening. Then he made the same gesture I'd seen the locals make in Kuching when I asked about remote areas, fingers spread like claws, drawn across the heart. "We need to change direction," he said finally. "Go more north. This way is not good." Derek pulled out his GPS. "But the village is directly east. Going north will add at least a day to our journey." Kenji's expression hardened. "Some paths are not for us to walk." An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. I could see Derek's frustration warring with his respect for local knowledge. Sasha placed a hand on his arm. "Kenji knows this jungle," she reminded him softly. "If he says we should go another way, I think we should listen." Derek sighed but nodded. "You're right, north it is." Relief softened Kenji's features. As we adjusted our course, I found myself glancing back at the path we weren't taking. It looked no different from the jungle we'd been traversing all day. The same dense vegetation, the same filtered green light. Yet something about Kenji's reaction sent a chill through me, despite the oppressive heat. That night, making camp by a narrow stream, the atmosphere was tense. Derek was still frustrated by the detour. Kenji was more withdrawn than usual, his eyes constantly scanning the jungle around us. Even Sasha's usual cheerfulness seemed subdued. As we ate our dinner in silence, I felt a growing unease. The jungle sounds, the constant background chorus of insects, birds, and distant monkeys that had accompanied us for 2 days, seemed different. Not quieter exactly, but somehow wrong, discordant, like musicians playing from different sheet music. "Do you hear that?" I asked suddenly, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Derek looked up from his food. "Hear what?" "The jungle, it sounds off." Kenji's head snapped up, his gaze locking with mine. For the first time, I saw naked fear in his eyes. He set down his plate and moved to my side, his voice low and urgent. "What do you hear?" he demanded. Embarrassed by his intensity and the others' confused looks, I shrugged. "I don't know. It just sounds different. Wrong somehow." Kenji gripped my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. You must tell me exactly. What is wrong with the sound? I don't know how to explain it, I stammered. Like the rhythm is wrong? Like everything is slightly out of sync? He released my arm and straightened, his expression grim. We leave at first light. No arguments, he added with a glance at Derek. We must reach the higher ground before dark tomorrow. What's going on, Kenji? Sasha asked, her voice tinged with worry. Is there danger? The jungle is disturbed, he said after a long pause. Something is awake that should be sleeping. Despite the warmth of the evening, I felt cold. The wood carving Kenji had given me before our departure seemed to burn in my pocket. I pulled it out, studying the crude bird shape in the firelight. What are these really for? I asked, holding it up. You said protection. From what? Kenji's eyes reflected the flames as he looked at me. From attention. The jungle sees us, hears us, feels us, walking on its skin. He's reminded that we are guests, not intruders. Derek made a small, skeptical sound. Kenji turned to him sharply. You think this is superstition, he said. Folk tales to scare children. This is why tourists die. They do not listen. The bluntness of his statement silenced us all. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the night sky. Beyond our small circle of light, the jungle continued its discordant symphony. We should sleep, Kenji said finally. I will take first watch. In my tent, sleep proved elusive. The ground beneath my sleeping pad felt unusually hard, uncomfortable despite my exhaustion. Every sound outside made me tense, and beneath it all was that persistent wrongness in the jungle noises, like an itch I couldn't scratch. I must have drifted off eventually, because I woke suddenly to complete silence. The jungle had gone quiet. I lay still, my heart pounding in my ears. The silence was absolute, unnatural. Not even the sound of wind in the trees. That's when I saw the light, a faint blue glow seeping through the fabric of my tent. It pulsed gently, rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. I should have called out for the others. I should have stayed in my tent. Instead, drawn by a curiosity I couldn't explain, I unzipped the entrance as quietly as possible and peered out. The clearing was empty. The fire had died to embers, casting just enough light to see that Kenji was no longer at his post. Sasha and Derek's tent was dark and still. The blue light was coming from the jungle, perhaps 50 yards away. It hovered among the trees, pulsing with that same hypnotic rhythm. It reminded me of the bioluminescent plankton I'd seen on a night swim in Thailand, but brighter, more deliberate in its movements. Without fully understanding why, I slipped out of my tent. The ground was cool beneath my bare feet as I moved toward the light. Some small part of my mind was screaming a warning, but it was drowned out by an overwhelming compulsion to follow. The light retreated as I approached, staying just out of reach, leading me deeper into the jungle. I should have been afraid of getting lost, of the darkness, of whatever might be lurking unseen around me. Instead, I felt only that strange, detached curiosity. Time lost meaning as I followed the pulsing glow. I couldn't have said if minutes or hours passed. The jungle around me blurred into a dark tunnel, the blue light my only focus. Then suddenly it stopped. The light hovered at the edge of a small clearing I hadn't seen before. As I approached, it pulsed once, brightly, then vanished. In its place, illuminated by moonlight filtering through the canopy, was a trail. Not an animal path or a natural break in the vegetation, but a clearly defined trail, its edges too straight to be natural. It wasn't overgrown like an abandoned path. It looked freshly cleared, yet showed no signs of machete cuts or human tools. I stood at its entrance, suddenly uncertain. The silence around me was oppressive, expectant. The compulsion that had drawn me this far was fading, reason returning like cold water to the face. I needed to go back, find camp, wake the others. I turned, only to find the way I'd come was now a solid wall of vegetation, as if the jungle had closed behind me while I was distracted by the light. Panic flared as I pushed against the dense foliage, searching for a way through, but it was impenetrable. A voice whispered behind me, so faint it might have been the wind, if there had been any. "Come. We've been waiting for you, Jamie." I froze. The voice had used my name, my real name, not the nickname I used with fellow travelers. Slowly, I turned back to the mysterious trail. It was no longer empty. Standing in the center of the path, about 20 feet away, was a figure. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, its proportions subtly distorted. It was hard to make out details in the moonlight, but I could see it wore some kind of mask. A flat wooden oval where a face should be. "Jamie," it whispered again, the sound coming not from the mask, but from all around me. "We know why you run. We know what you fear." My body went cold with terror. The figure took a step toward me, moving with a fluid grace that was beautiful and horrifying at once. "Your father calls for you in his confusion," the figure continued, "but we can make it stop. We can give you what you seek. No more running, no more fear." Another step closer. I could see the mask more clearly now. A smooth, featureless oval with just the suggestion of eyes and mouth, like a face not quite finished. It reminded me of the masks I'd seen in museums, said to house spirits or ancestors. "How do you know about my father?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "The jungle knows what the heart holds," the figure replied. "The jungle hears the stories we tell ourselves in darkness." It extended one unnaturally long arm, fingers too numerous and too slender reaching toward me. "Come with us, Jamie. See what lies beyond the path." My feet began to move of their own accord, drawn forward by an invisible force. I fought against it, straining backward, but it was like trying to resist a powerful current. "No," I gasped. "I need to go back, my friends. They cannot help you. They do not hear what you hear. They do not see what you see." The figure's words chilled me more than anything else had. It was right. I was the only one who had noticed the wrongness in the jungle sounds. The only one Kenji had looked at with real fear when I mentioned it. "What are you?" I asked, still struggling against the invisible pull. The figure tilted its head at an impossible angle, the blank mask catching moonlight. "We are the forgotten ones, the first people. Those who knew the jungle before it was jungle, before the trees, before the sky, when all was darkness and dream." It took another step closer, now close enough that I could smell it, an ancient, musty scent, like opened tombs and disturbed earth. "And you, Jamie Chen, are meant to be one of us, a vessel for the old memory, a face for the faceless." At those words, something snapped inside me. Pure terror broke through the strange compulsion, flooding my body with adrenaline. I turned and threw myself at the wall of vegetation that blocked my return, no longer caring about cuts or scratches. I tore at vines, pushed through thorns, ignoring the pain as they raked my skin. Behind me, I heard a sound like wood cracking, followed by a hiss of fury that no human throat could make. The invisible force pulling me toward the figure intensified, nearly yanking me off my feet. "You cannot escape," the voice said, now harsh and cold. "The jungle has chosen you. The mask has been carved. Your place awaits." "No!" I screamed, redoubling my efforts. My hands were slick with blood from dozens of cuts, but I kept pushing, tearing, fighting my way through the vegetation. Suddenly, I fell forward as the barrier gave way. I landed hard on damp earth, the breath knocked from my lungs. When I looked up, gasping, I saw our camp just ahead, the embers of our fire still glowing faintly. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not daring to look back. "Kenji!" I screamed. "Sasha! Derek! Wake up!" I burst into the clearing just as Kenji emerged from the trees on the opposite side, his face taut with fear. He had his machete drawn, the blade gleaming in the faint light. What happened? He demanded, rushing to meet me. Why did you leave camp? There was a light, I gasped. Blue light. I followed it. There's something out there, something with a mask. It knew my name, Kenji. It knew about my father. His face drained of color. He gripped my shoulders, his eyes searching mine. Did you walk the path? The straight path? I nodded, trembling. It tried to take me. It said I was meant to be one of them, a vessel for the old memory. Kenji made the claw-across heart gesture, his hand shaking. We must leave, now. He turned towards Sasha and Derek's tent. Wake them, no time to pack properly. Take only what you need to survive. As I moved toward their tent, I noticed something strange. Drag marks in the dirt leading from the tent toward the jungle. My blood turned to ice. Kenji, I called, my voice breaking. I think something's wrong. He was beside me in an instant. Together we unzipped the tent flap. It was empty. Their sleeping bags were still there, looking as if they'd been suddenly abandoned. Sasha's glasses lay neatly folded beside her pillow. Derek's watch was on top of his backpack. No, I moaned, backing away from the tent. This can't be happening. They were just here. Kenji's face was grim as he examined the drag marks. They led directly toward the area where I had followed the blue light. They have been taken, he said quietly, by the Penungu Hutan, the forest watchers. We have to find them, I insisted, panic rising in my throat. We have to help them. He shook his head slowly. Once taken, there is no return. They walk the path now. No, I grabbed his arm. There has to be a way. We can't just leave them. Kenji stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it took my breath away. You heard the wrongness in the jungle, he said finally. You were meant to be taken too, but something protected you. His gaze fell to the wooden bird carving that still hung from a cord around my neck. The old symbols still have power, it seems. Can we use them to help Sasha and Derek? I pleaded. His silence was answer enough. In the distance, from the direction where I had encountered the masked figure, came a sound that made my skin crawl. Wooden clacking, like dozens of those blank masks striking together. It was growing louder, coming closer. We must go, Kenji urged, gathering his pack and machete. They will return for you. Now that they have marked you, they will never stop hunting. I wanted to argue, to insist we search for my friends, but the rational part of my mind knew he was right. The clacking sound was closer now, accompanied by a soft chorus of whispers. Too many voices speaking just below the threshold of comprehension. We fled into the jungle, Kenji leading the way with unerring precision despite the darkness. I followed, tears blurring my vision, my heart heavy with guilt and grief. Behind us, the whispers and wooden clacking pursued, sometimes fading, sometimes growing suddenly closer, as if the things chasing us could move through the jungle in ways we couldn't understand. By dawn, we had reached a river wide enough that the current created a natural break in the dense vegetation. Kenji led me to a small fishing camp where 2 local men agreed to take us downriver in their boat. As we pulled away from shore, I looked back toward the jungle we'd fled. Standing at the tree line, partially hidden in shadow, were 3 figures. 2 were tall and thin, with those blank wooden masks. Between them was a 3rd figure, shorter, more human in proportion. It wore Sasha's blue shirt and Derek's distinctive red bandana. But where its face should have been was a wooden mask, freshly carved, the surface still pale and new compared to the others. As we drifted farther downriver, I saw more masked figures emerge from the trees to stand alongside the first 3. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Some wore clothing that looked decades old, rotting on their unnaturally shaped bodies. Some wore more recent attire, hiking gear, camera straps, backpacks. All wore those blank wooden masks. They raised their 2 long arms in perfect unison as our boat rounded a bend in the river, as if bidding us farewell, or promising to wait. The authorities searched for 3 days after we reached civilization. They found no sign of our campsite, no sign of Sasha or Derek. According to their GPS coordinates, they had searched the exact area where we had been, but found only undisturbed jungle. No evidence that anyone had passed through in years. I returned home, back to my father, whose condition had worsened in my absence, back to my mother, whose eyes held no accusation, but whose silence spoke volumes. I told no one the full truth of what happened in the jungle. Who would believe me? But sometimes, in my father's moments of clarity, he looks at me with recognition and fear. "You brought something back with you," he whispered once. "Something is watching us through your eyes." And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I think I see my face becoming smoother, features less defined, more like a mask that hasn't been fully carved. 3 weeks ago, I found a small wooden bird carving on my pillow, identical to the one Kenji gave me, the one that disappeared during our flight through the jungle. Beside it was a note in unfamiliar handwriting. "The path remains open. The mask awaits." I've moved twice since then, changed my phone number, deleted my social media, but they keep finding me. Last night I dreamt of the jungle, of standing in a circle of stone pillars surrounded by masked figures. Sasha and Derek were there, their wooden faces now aged and weathered like the oldest masks. They held a new mask in their 2 long fingers, a mask with my features perfect in every detail. "Come home," they whispered. "The jungle misses you." I woke to find a straight, unnatural path cut through the furniture of my bedroom, everything pushed aside to create a direct line from my bed to the door, as if something wanted to show me the way. I'm writing this now as a warning. If you go to Borneo, stay on the marked trails. If you hear wrongness in the jungle sounds, turn back immediately. And if you see a blue light among the trees, close your eyes and run. Because the forest watchers are patient. They have existed since before the jungle was jungle. And once they've chosen you, once your mask has been carved, there is nowhere in this world you can hide. The path always finds you in the end.